This fantasy view of armed conflict is far removed from the real thing. Or is it?
The electronic war.
The real thing can take a soldier to many deprived and dangerous areas of the world where high technology is not much in evidence. In these circumstances, death by laser or radio waves may seem remote to the soldier on patrol. The electronic age has not got much to do with this kind of soldiering. Or has it?
Thank God for that. I thought you'd never get it. Griff, go on the radio, find out if there's been any problem.
Hold it. We've got a contact from Whiskey 1-1. Grid 145-968. Urgently require assistance.
Whiskey 1-1, that's Bob's line, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Tell him we'll be on our way.
Whiskey 1-1, this is Whiskey 1-3. We'll move to your location now. Out.
The enemy do not need to be very sophisticated. Electronic warfare can often be as simple as an intercepted signal or a piece of deliberate deception over the airwaves.
OK, get on to Whiskey 1-1. Tell them we can see the farmhouse. We're within 500 metres of their location now. We need a rendezvous.
Being caught out by this unseen enemy is no game.
1-1, this is Whiskey 1-3. We're now within 500 metres of your position. Send a grid of vinyl RV. Over.
Hello, Whiskey 1-3. This is Whiskey 1-1. Contact. Grid 149-968. Over.
Electronic warfare is no respecter of rank.
The ambassador's now arriving here in his own vehicle, about 12:30, 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
One I'm at northeast gate and proceeding to cook out now with it.
Electronic warfare includes in its scope many everyday activities. It may not look like Star Wars, but that's just what it is.
Hello, Zero, this is Zero Delta, radio check, over. Zero Delta, roger. A reference...
Far from being a fantasy, the effects can be very real when things go wrong.
The ambassador's now arriving here in his own vehicle, about 12:30.
Hello, Zero, this is Zero Delta, radio check, over.
Check out the fuel compound, everything's secure. Moving on to the cookhouse now.
Electronic warfare at its simplest means that anything that emits, whether radio, radar, laser or infrared, can all help you to build up a picture of what the other side is up to. They can do the same thing to you.
Mike 10, all friendly call sign, casualties are dead.
Everything that produces an electromagnetic emission can play its part in electronic warfare and be exploited by friendly forces or by the enemy. The threat is present during British Army actions in support of humanitarian aid or counter-terrorist operations. These are politically sensitive and of growing importance following the retreat of communism. During world conflicts and the 40-year-long Cold War, electronic warfare has played a major part. During these periods of confrontation and tension, considerable advances were made. Electronic warfare is not a static science. Each improvement of technology or technique has to be countered by a response from the other side. The process can be compared to a game of tennis. The best players are those who, even as they are delivering a shot, are thinking how they would themselves respond to it if they were on the other side of the net. By 1991, the advances in technology were seen by the watching world. Electronic warfare has been described as a force multiplier, enabling, as it did in the Gulf War, the successful Allies to take on and defeat a much larger force than their own. This game of tennis is about techniques as much as technology. What is the state of play at the present time? It would be a mistake to think of electronic warfare as always being highly sophisticated. Scanners can be bought commercially, which allow anyone to eavesdrop on almost anything or anyone. It is often the hobby of amateur radio enthusiasts to monitor sensitive nets.
There he is. Over there.
Eavesdropping on the enemy, or offensive electronic warfare, and trying to prevent him doing it to you, defensive electronic warfare, are two interrelated disciplines.
Well, same guy again. He's come at this time and was on the Mortinet this time.
Yeah, that's the one we had earlier.
Yeah. Chance in the contact report.
It could be said to have all begun in 1905. The Russian and Japanese imperial fleets steamed towards each other. As the Russians telegraphed their battle plans around the fleet, the Japanese listened in on their new Marconi equipment. Before the two fleets were in visual contact, the Japanese admiral had already made his own plans. Only 3 out of 35 Russian vessels survived. What is the relevance of this historic event to electronic warfare today?
The Japanese beat the Russians because they won the information battle. The information battle is probably the most vital element of a modern campaign. Some commanders even believe that you can win a battle before a shot is fired if you win the information battle. And in this information battle, electronic warfare is a vital central activity, because in modern warfare, there is so much information. It is manipulated, processed, transported around using electronic systems, and therefore you have to attack the enemy's systems and protect your own.
Electronic warfare support measures, or ESM, listening to the other side, is an undetectable offensive activity, searching for signals, intercepting, and then identifying them. It's an electronic recce, providing targets for physical attack or for electronic countermeasures. The job of searching through the frequency spectrum for these targets has been immeasurably speeded by computer technology and software developments. A computer can now do in seconds what previously would have taken hours or even days. The ESM operator is looking for enemy combat net radio in the HF and VHF bands. He is also searching for air traffic control and air defense communications and radars. Before the end of the Cold War, the Soviet EW threat to NATO forces was the most extensive and highly developed in the world. Every Soviet army had a signals intelligence or SIGINT regiment. Every division had its own SIGINT company. There were many fixed electronic installations and listening posts throughout Eastern Europe. Almost every Soviet vessel at sea had some kind of SIGINT capability. Highly specialized intelligence-gathering ships were, and still are, positioned so as to listen in on key Western microwave links or NATO naval exercise traffic. In the air, a single patrolling aircraft at 25,000 feet could encompass an area of 300,000 square miles, equivalent to the whole of the British Isles, and monitor across the entire frequency spectrum. Earth stations in Russia listened to Western satellite traffic, and probably still do. The Soviet Union no longer exists, but the technology and techniques both there and elsewhere are still advancing. Now, even the faint radiation given off by a VDU or computer screen can be intercepted and subsequently analyzed from outside an office building.
Have some DF on this, please.
In the electronic war, it is not always the message content which is being searched for. The very existence of radio traffic in itself is of interest. The first question is often, where is it coming from? Direction finding has already reached out into space. Soviet Earth stations were routinely obtaining fixes on Western submarine and other naval movements in the high seas. Any satellite communications terminal powerful enough to illuminate more than one satellite can be located in this way. A patrolling aircraft, perhaps hundreds of miles away, can lock onto a signal and take a series of bearings. Where all the lines intersect is a potential target. Using computer technology and software, it only needs 5 seconds or less of transmission to obtain a fix. This can be accurate to 1 degree over 40 kilometers. This means it will only be 1 kilometer out. Direction finding from 2 or more listening posts can narrow the target area down. All of this process is usually fully automated and extremely fast. Having detected the signal and its source, the next job is analysis. This is the crucial element of electronic warfare. What can each side learn about the other? Even here, it is not always necessary to decipher the message content. Radar systems and a number of fixed and moving beacons give off a clear and identifiable electronic signal. The acquisition of this kind of non-comms ESM is of considerable value to commanders. Even where enemy command, control and communication systems have been identified, there is much that can be learned before the content is decoded. What kind of layout and mix of equipment is there? A combination of VHF and HF operating in secure and insecure nets could, for example, indicate the position of a brigade HQ. Particular kinds of equipment can be a giveaway. Some units use non-standard kit which transmits its own distinctive characteristics. However sparse the use and tight the radio disciplines, a unit like this can be advertising its presence far and wide to those who know. It is the job of the electronic warfare expert to spot these small differences and to know how to exploit them. This is the signal given off by a standard transmitter of a kind in common use. This one, however, would be easily recognizable. Wherever the transmitter moves to, as the battle or peacetime exercise progresses, its location can be followed and logged by the enemy. This type of electronic fingerprinting can be matched by the individual voice characteristics or mannerisms of the radio net users on insecure radios. A defector from an Eastern Bloc country during the last years of the Cold War explained in a lengthy debriefing why this kind of detailed knowledge was considered so important by the Soviet military command.
Back to one.
I think I would say we got most from two main sources. The first was whether
changes in normal patterns of activity were looked for, individually perhaps seeming unimportant, but together adding up to a clear warning signal.
For your generals.
Open talk, particularly by senior officers, provided much valuable information.
They seem to be unaware that most telephone systems are carried by microwave. And of course, we listen to those. Generals don't think about this. They give away...
He said that Eastern Bloc radio direction finding stations were routinely locating Western transmissions within 5 seconds. Characteristics that helped to identify units easily over a period of time were distinctive voices, breaks in procedure, and regular communications checks.
Our staffs were convinced that the procedures that you were using on exercise would be the same as those in wartime.
A combination of errors with a degree of carelessness in the use of voice procedures allows one side to build up a considerable amount of knowledge about the locations, movements, and intentions of the other. Communications intelligence, or COMINT, embraces all kinds of radio nets, as well as the growing use of mobile telephones and fax. During past wars, there have been a few spectacular lapses of security, resulting in some cases in many deaths. In the North African desert, German radio intercept units discovered from British radio sources that there was a traffic jam in a well-known defile. Bombers were dispatched to destroy the targets. A classic case of the misuse of radio causing self-inflicted destruction. The basic rules of the electronic war game have not changed much in the last 40 years. Techniques, and particularly technology, are advancing all the time. This applies as much to ESM as the next important branch of electronic warfare. Jamming, deception, and neutralization by physical destruction or electromagnetic means are all aspects of ECM, or electronic countermeasures. ECM, unlike ESM, which is passive and therefore undetectable, is actively offensive. In most cases, it is detectable by the enemy, and often intended to be. Jamming is the simplest form of ECM. Directed only at the radio receivers, a powerful transmission overwhelms the normal traffic, disrupting the command and control function. A barrage jammer, broadcast in a broad band, obliterates everything within range, perhaps including one's own friendly force radio traffic. Spot jamming is directed only at chosen frequencies.
Got a gem task, Ken.
Jamming is best used like an artillery barrage, not constantly, but as part of a major action, hitting the enemy just when they need to rely on a communications network which has, up to then, been reliable. Broadband jammers need to be as close as possible to the enemy and ideally unmounted in armoured vehicles. Because of their effect, they are prime targets for DF and destruction and need to keep moving and keep jamming as they move. Effective jamming of ground systems can be carried out by airborne jammers. Remotely piloted vehicles can also be used to carry the jamming forward of the line of battle. Expendable broadband jammers can be placed right among the enemy positions by hand, by artillery fire, or as cluster bombs, creating an electromagnetic minefield. A decision may be made not to jam. It can be of more value to listen to the enemy or feed him false information by electronic means.
Cancel it.
deception plays an extremely important part in electronic warfare. The Gulf War provides us with one major example of strategic and tactical use of deception by electronic means. The British heavy tank forces, it could safely be assumed by the Iraqis, would form a central part of the main attack. They were moved to a new position 250 miles away just before the land war started. So that the Iraqis would not know that they had been repositioned, their place was taken by an electronic warfare detachment who had previously recorded the British radio traffic. They continued to broadcast, giving the same radio signature, while the real tank forces preserved radio silence 250 miles to the west until the time for the ground attack came. ECM recognizes the importance of enemy electronic activity by setting a very high priority on countering it. Eliminating the transmitters after direction finding can take the form of physical destruction by artillery or aircraft. Russian doctrine favored this means above jamming. Advances have been made in missiles which home in on radar installations as soon as they are switched on. In this way, during the 1982 war, Israeli aircraft were able to eliminate 13 out of 15 SAM sites at the outbreak of hostilities. The frequencies can be noted by probing flights, perhaps during peacetime. Electromagnetic neutralization can be used to disable temporarily or permanently opposing electronics. Powerful directed energy weapons have been and are being developed. An effective weapon against low-flying aircraft confuses the aircraft's terrain-following radar, forcing the aircraft skywards, making it more vulnerable to missile and AAA attack. From ECM, we move on to the third major branch of electronic warfare. This is Defense Against Electronic Warfare, or EPM, Electronic Protective Measures, increasingly a vital factor in success and survival on the modern battlefield. The need for platform protection recognizes the huge capital costs of some military assets and the necessity of providing them with effective EPM. 1/4 of the cost of a combat aircraft is in the electronic warfare packages which make up its offensive and defensive systems. The crown jewels of the ground forces are not so much in capital assets as in their command, control and communications networks. These are the prime targets for enemy jamming and other offensive operations. Electronic self-defense is not just up to the signals people. It is everyone's job to limit the effects of enemy electronic warfare. How can this be done? The positioning of transmitters so that the signal is screened from enemy ESM can be achieved simply by using terrain masking, putting a hill between you and the enemy instead of setting up on top of it. Carefully placed jammers can provide a mask or curtain behind which friendly force radio nets can continue to operate undetected. With combat net radio, the lowest possible transmission power should be used to avoid direction finding and intercept.
Hello, Delta 30, this is 0 Delta, give me a secure channel.
The narrowest beam width as well as the lowest possible transmission power should be used in SATCOMs, so as to illuminate only one satellite and reduce the risk of being geolocated or DF'd.
Hello, 0, this is 0 Delta. My task is complete, I'm heading to your location. Out.
King, help me.
Remember, 5 seconds is more than enough for computer-aided direction-finding systems. Transmissions should always be kept as short as possible.
This is Mike 10. Sit rep 1800 over.
The skillful use of available technology helps support electronic self-defense. Directional antennae can be used to create a dead spot towards the enemy. The use of frequency hopping, changing rapidly from one transmission frequency to another, reduces the risk of DF and analysis. When computer display terminals are to be used, remember that sophisticated electronic protective measures exist. Call in the experts. Encryption, benefiting from computer software developments, reduces the risk of the enemy finding out much more than what you are and where you're located. The greatest threat, and consequently a vital aspect of EPM, which everyone is responsible for, is the protection of these secret codes. United States Navy operations plans and fleet locations were in Soviet hands through much of the 1970s because of betrayal of secret codes.
Cryptographic information is so important that it's regarded as the keys to the vault. Give me your codes, and I don't need your war plans. I don't need your operating plans, because I've got them already.
The end of the Cold War has not obliterated the enormous pool of highly trained people assembled by the regimes whose work was described by the Eastern European defector. Many of these people are available to the new countries of the region and their former allies. Soviet-trained people and equipment are on the market throughout the world.
0 Alpha, this is X-ray 10. Say again, over.
Precisely because there is no obvious major enemy, standards and vigilance must be kept up. A future enemy could well begin by compiling a dossier of electronic signatures given out by the different types of our equipment, and also the personal signatures of key individuals, even when using the communication systems correctly.
And Mike 10, roger, ETA 20 minutes, over.
Constant monitoring of standards and effective training are crucial.
Check the battalion net, John, please.
Okay. ComSec teams monitor major exercises to assess EPM performance. In the past, the results have not been encouraging.
Now over. Roger, can you go via the M3 park and check the security of all the vehicles there, over?
The ambassador's now arriving here in his own vehicle, about 12:30, 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
0 this is 0 Delta, radio check, over.
We should exercise communications, not just use communications to run our exercises.
Well, it's important that we invest in electronic warfare. There are many aspects of electronic warfare that will be high-tech and will involve specialists, but it's certainly not just a matter for specialists. It's a matter for commanders, for staff officers, for soldiers, for everybody involved in military operations. And whether you're out in the field on operations or back in barracks, training or preparing for operations, it concerns you. If you use an electronic system, a telephone, a computer, a radio, it concerns you, because you could give information to the enemy and you could therefore assist in losing the information battle. So electronic warfare is certainly a matter for everybody.
The next major conflict may well be against an enemy equipped with friendly nations equipment, or a mix of that with Warsaw Pact systems, as was the case in the Falklands conflict and the Gulf War. Of course, there will continue to be major technical advances.
One of the things that certainly came about in the Gulf conflict was the fact that equipment needs to be more easily reprogrammable in the field. The equipment that was used in the Gulf War by the coalition forces was really designed with the anti-Soviet Union in view. What happened in the Gulf conflict was that we were suddenly faced with equipment that had been designed and produced in the West, so that the equipment being used by the coalition forces had to be reprogrammed to cope with that type of situation. And I think this is something that's going to happen in the future to a large extent, in that the hardware that you have will have to be upgraded by software in the field itself.
The electronic war has already moved into space. Some years ago, a US military satellite had a brainstorm and lost its memory. The finger of suspicion at that time pointed to outside interference. However, the greatest danger in peacetime or during low-level confrontations of the policing and humanitarian kind can often come from the misuse of simple communications such as telephone, fax and radio, and not necessarily used by military personnel. It could be local forces and civilians working with the military or aid organizations.
Hello Bob, it's Tim. Those supplies you ordered from us last night, there's going to be a 6-hour delay. The Army's got some medical supplies they want out by first light this morning, okay?
I think I've got one for you here. It sounds like it's local dialogue. Frequency is 37.15.
Yeah, this bloke, he's talking about an ambush tomorrow morning. I don't know where yet. Wait. There's a convoy leaving at dawn.
A convoy, as yet unseen by the enemy, who know of its movements because of an intercepted call.
Watch me!
Terrorists move into the attack, confident that they have the advantage of surprise. Friendly forces, alerted by another intercepted message, surprised the terrorists.
Juliet 23, roger, a call sign, Juliet 22 has problems.
British Army, stop order fire! Put your weapons on the ground and stand up!
The electronic war is not a game. Misuse of communications can seriously compromise plans. It can be the deciding factor. An electronic signature could mean signing away the lives of thousands of people.
Our location grid.
The race for electronic supremacy and the successful use of electronic warfare will be crucial in the winning of the next war. Electronic warfare is not just for the specialists. Everyone has a part to play. The personal survival of each individual could depend on their grasp of the basic rules of the electronic war game and the realization that it is not a game.